Hey everybody, welcome to Game Audio number 84. I didn't say it backwards this week, Mike. This is our weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas, the latest techniques, project experience, to audio secrets. Here's where you find your in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio, and I almost forgot what that was I was supposed to be saying. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing spiffy keen. As always, we have amazing weather, so I've taken to just lying outside on the porch all day, not doing anything. So if anyone wants to know the interrelationship between productivity and weather, that's a data point for you.
Alex, how's your weather?
I'm doing Keeny Spiff, and I've taken to staying inside because it's very cloudy and overcast outside. So if anybody wants to... no, I've forgotten. I can't remember the rest of what Mike said. Something about data points. My data point is okay. How's your data point, Mike?
Never been better.
What about Vince's data?
I'm good, thanks.
Good.
My data points are pretty okay. Man, it was pretty great. It's amazing to think that late November is going out and swimming weather, but that's exactly what I did this weekend. And I love LA. Have I mentioned that? Yes, I love LA.
That's awesome. Hey, so today we're talking about phrase libraries versus regular libraries. Are there any other kinds of libraries? You got phrase libraries, you got non-phrase libraries. What do you got?
Lending libraries. Lending libraries.
Oh, no.
That's funny. Somebody had to grab the low-hanging fruit.
I guess there are MIDI phrase libraries as well, which is another category.
Oh, and there's modeling libraries, I guess, right? That fall into a category of different than non-phrase libraries somehow.
So I guess we should probably explain exactly. We should probably explain what exactly we mean by a phrase library, just in case people are unsure what that means.
Definitely. Go!
So, a phrase library, of my limited understanding, and I think everybody can probably predict which side of the fence I'm going to be on in today's episode. My limited understanding is a phrase library is basically, especially with regard to orchestral instrumentation, there are not only preset sounds, but preset little flourishes and instrumental. Mike, you're going to have to help me.
Well, the real distinction is what is the response to MIDI input, and when we think of a typical sample library, when we send a specific MIDI pitch, we get one note back, or a recording of one note, but it's usually a one-to-one relationship. And with a phrase library, in response to MIDI input, you get a recorded performance of some kind, two or more notes. And I guess the simplest form of this might be, as you said, like a grace note or an ornamentation or violin run. There are a lot of run libraries because those are things that are hard to do satisfactorily if you're just slapping together a bunch of individual notes. But they can get pretty elaborate. There are phrase libraries where you essentially have pre-composed segments, very short loopable accompaniment patterns, I guess is the most typical thing, that you can use as a building block for your composition, maybe a rough draft or kind of a conceptual sketch, or if you feel ambitious, I guess it's feeling the opposite of ambitious. If you feel the opposite of ambitious, you can just use that as part of your composition. So these libraries really run the gamut of granularity from, here's a note with a little grace note, to here is 8 measures of a Hans Zimmerian groove that you can lightly embellish and call your own.
It's funny you mentioned Hans Zimmer. That was actually my first experience with phrase libraries. Before I saw things like, oh, here's some CDs, some floppy disks. You could pop it into your S760 sampler, and you're triggering individual notes. Then I saw that my friend had something called Hans Zimmer Guitars, Volume 1. And instead of the individual notes that I was used to hearing, I was hearing big effects and, big driving rhythms at various tempos and all that. This was back in the what, 2000, 2001, and I was actually rather blown away by it. And I thought, wow, this is so cool. I should just do this. And I found out there were phrase libraries for all sorts of stuff, not just guitars, but orchestral instruments. And then I succeeded in absolutely disliking the process. I really didn't enjoy any of the phrase libraries that I played around with back in the early 2000s, and I summarily dismissed them.
Yeah, I can relate to that too. There was a bunch of discs I bought off of Zero G, which were a bunch of Celtic instruments, and I was so excited when I got them, and then I wasn't crazy about them. They were just so static. It was just that was the only thing I could do with it. And when you're writing, you know, you're coming up with something that might flow from one key change to another, and you want this passage to go through, this phrase to pass from one chord to another, I should say, and it doesn't, you know, because. So it really takes, in some ways, they can take you out of your element. The old phrase libraries, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
How about the new phrase libraries?
Well, you know, I could go on for quite a while about what I've been using recently, which is Sonokinetic Capriccio. But I didn't want to dig into that just quite yet. I kind of wanted to build up to what they could do. So are you guys using any kind of like Mike mentioned in the email about and also at the beginning of this run, like grace notes and things like that? Mike, do you use any kind of like very small phrases?
Well, yeah, I think anyone doing orchestral emulation is normally using a number of common utilitarian phrase samples. I mentioned violin runs, which tend to sound better than a sequence of spiccato or staccato violin pitches, because you're getting the transition between each note, which is, you know, the transients are so idiosyncratic for a violin run that just the juxtaposition of a bunch of individual notes doesn't sound anything like it. Rolls, like timpani rolls, I think are very common phrases, and effects. You know, you'll have your typical, I want the sound of someone having some sort of ischemic attack while playing the piccolo for my horror score, so you'll have like crazy overblown flute sounds and or James Horner style panpipes. All those little phraselets are, I think, stock and trade of most contemporary orchestral libraries and ethnic / world libraries, especially. You know, if you get like a world library, you very typically will get not just individual notes, but some kind of phrase that feels natural for that instrument or draws from some folk music traditions that are usually there. So in terms of individual, that's a hard word to say, individual phrases, I think we've all dipped into that well. Where it comes to actual phrase libraries, I tend to lean towards the ones that are a little more elemental, where in exchange for your MIDI note press, you're not getting a fully composed phrase, but you'll get some kind of pattern or ostinato, something a little simpler and maybe a little more flexible, so that way I can feel like it's I'm composing and not as much arranging.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Do you guys consider DJing as a form of composition?
Oh man, there's a whole spectrum there when it comes to DJing. You know, there's DJing, and then there are the guys that are turntablists, that are just real virtuoso artists that they're not just interested in the timing of things. The way that they actually manipulate the hamster, the way that they actually they have a quality for the tempo as it comes into sync with another song, and actually using the sound of that transition in a really meaningful way. I think turntablism can be really artistic, but there is also a baseline of DJing which is rather easy to hit, what with AutoSync and all the different apps that are available. Now you can do DJing on your iPhone if you want, and I'm not sure there's a lot of artistry there.
I'm not trying to make a direct analogy between using phrase libraries and DJing, but I think it's sort of, I don't know. Okay, I'm going to come out and say it. I'm cynical. You knew I was coming in with this.
Yes.
Phrase libraries, I think that I remember when my first exposure to phrase, I don't actually have any, and I've never used any, so I guess I'm the worst person in the world to offer any opinion about any of this. But as you can imagine, the idea to me sort of seems a little bit, not that it's cheating, but it's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of, it's really hard, isn't it? I think
I totally get you on that.
I think that the analogy, the reason I asked about DJing is because, of course, with DJing, you are working with pre-produced music, and people would sort of, the cynics with regard to DJing. By the way, I completely agree that DJing is a form of composition, especially, scratch artists and turntablists. It's just incredible stuff. And the skill of DJing is not something that anybody can just pick up with their audio sync, because, of course, reading the crowd, selecting the music, adjusting sort of the flow, controlling the energy, that kind of stuff is a real skill. It's a little different from the skill of actually writing music, but it's definitely a skill and an art. So coming back to using phrase libraries, I think I see them as a little bit similar in that you're taking these constructed chunks made by or recorded by orchestras, piecing them together in a nice coherent form to create a piece of music. And of course, you can't write an entire cue for a game just using phrases. You're going to need to get your hands dirty in there.
Is that a challenge there?
Just using phrases alone, of course, it's not a case of just triggering them and off you go. You've got your soundtrack. You do need to have some understanding of what you're doing, and you do need to have the ability to produce and mix things together. But I don't know. It seems a bit to me like it's kind of like back when you can see I'm just sort of skirting around what I'm trying to say here.
I think we get what you're saying. I mean, I feel that too. Yeah,
it sort of feels a bit like cheating somehow. That okay, if somebody asked me to write a piece of orchestral music, I've never really written orchestral music, so I wouldn't really know where to begin. I listen to a lot of it, but I've never really written or tried to write some myself. So my first reaction if somebody asked me to write orchestral music would be to say, oh, you should contact this guy called Mike Shapiro.
Good.
Well trained.
But then, grab your phrasal library and, oh, that sounds good. Yeah, that'll do. Just slam that in. Oh, great. Now it sounds like an orchestra playing. Oh, that's cool. This is, add this tension here. Oh, this is good here. And it all seems a bit automatic to me.
Well, consider some early precursors to phrase libraries and see if your cynicism stands intact. If you are doing a studio recording, and let's say you bring a guitarist or a drummer or a shakuhachi flute player, chances are you are not going to write every single note that player plays. In the case of a drummer, you may literally just have hash marks and a couple of accents the entire way. For a guitarist, you might have chicken scratch and say, play like name of guitarist here. So there's definitely a lot of antecedent for relying on somebody else filling in the details, and it's not considered a cheat in these cases if you're letting the musician kind of do their thing. So is that really that different than some phrase libraries, at least, where you might hear a drum groove or like a string pattern or something like that? I mean, in this case, I guess you might be hearing an ensemble all simultaneously playing as opposed to a single instrumentalist just noodling around. But if the granularity is high enough, if the unit that you are borrowing is fairly small and the purpose is utilitarian, is it really that much of a cheat?
Is some yeah, I see your point. Does it ever, when you're listening to music written by other people in games, and you hear a phrase that comes from a library that you have, is there ever a moment of, oh, he used that, or oh, she just took that from this, this phrase library? Is there ever that moment, or are there so many phrases out there that you never come to a point where somebody picks out that you've used a certain phrase library in your music, or is that even a problem that somebody identifies that, oh, you have used that phrase library?
Well, obviously, people like us and our listeners are going to have great sensitivity to the sound of presets that they recognize, but there's a question of whether it really matters in terms of the end user's expectations. I doubt anyone playing a game, we're lucky if someone playing a game notices there's music or hears it at all, but it would be unthinkable if they're going to hold it, stop the game, Is that preset number 72 from, I think it comes with Logic. What hackery is this? And then ripping the DVD out of their PlayStation and throwing it across the room. That's probably not going to happen. So I think there's a real spectrum of sensitivity. I can remember, actually, a couple of cases listening to, I hate to say this, but I think there was a cue in Phantom Menace, like the little happy parade music at the end, and I could swear I heard a JV 1080 patch in there somewhere. And my heart not only broke, but it kind of like flew out of my body and just disappeared over the horizon. That's how disappointed I was. And there have been a couple of other scores in film when I've heard that. Games less frequently because there's so much clutter, acoustically, it's harder to recognize stuff. So anyway, the short answer is we care, but most people don't.
So for Phantom Menace, that JV 1080 patch is what took your heart out of your chest, and not the actual movie.
Oh, I was spiritually dead leaving the theater. Don't get me wrong. I'm just talking about the music.
It's like a double punch. I think it must just be me. I must just be really weird. Am I weird, Carl? Because when the back on the I think I might have mentioned this before, but the reason I'm so obsessed with like doing everything myself and not using presets and not even using samples and like creating them synths, wasting all this time doing this is because back on the Amiga in the early days of tracker music, there were like 2 floppy disks that had samples on them that everybody started with, and it was really, really obvious that when you've written a song with those 2 disks worth of sounds, like STO1 and STO2, in came people with the digitizer when the digitizer became popular, and they started digitizing their own synthesizers. And when you rolled in with your track that had custom samples, like actual things that you'd made yourself, that was just like instant prestige. And since those days, I've got this really odd complex with kind of trying to avoid having stuff that is taken from somebody else. Am I really strange, Carl?
Nah, no. It's all about your workflow, right? What you're used to doing. Of course, if you don't look outside of the possibilities and things change over time, then you might be missing out on something that could be very useful to you. I remember when I was a programmer and I got into web programming, there were these old guys, and yes, there are people older than me, who would still do web pages in a text editor. Now, it was kind of the early-ish days of the web. But they took this pride in that Luddite mentality of, I'm not going to use an interface that lets me drag a text box or bring over a drop down. And I used to think, my God, man, why make it harder on yourself? Mm-hmm. So, but it's all about their workflow and what they were used to. But they truly were missing out on opportunities. So maybe it's a mix of both. You maybe look into what's going on out there as opportunities that you could use to help speed up your process. And also it could help you maybe on a tracker edge, Alex, to look into some phrase libraries, because you could just drop in this phrase. You don't have to compose anything. You can still focus on what it is that you really dig in on, and yet add this like little flourish of a violin on top of something in one of the channels.
Yeah, I can see that. Oh, go ahead, Vince.
Sorry, you should go and finish this off.
Okay, I can finish off my rant. I can see that phrase libraries are especially with orchestral music, they're fantastic assets. Why? Because if you do need to write orchestral music and you don't know Mike Shapiro, then it enables you to get quick access to professionally, the instrumentation is all professionally done. It sounds great because it's done by people who know what they're doing. Of course, when it comes to writing orchestral music, you do need to pay homage to these certain cultural patterns and contexts that orchestral music comes in, and that's mostly done for you with phrasal libraries. So for somebody who's tasked with making that kind of music, and they need to do it quickly, they need to make it sound relatively authentic. I can see that phrasal libraries would be not only a lifesaver, but will allow you to deliver a really decent sounding result. And as you said, Mike, no end user or end listener is going to listen to the game and say, my God, they just used Native Instruments, symphony brass or whatever, and they didn't put any effort into it. Good one, guys, I'm not playing this game.
That's a dangerous thing too, on a whole, because there are people who who, although Mike is absolutely right, I don't think it stops the game, but among the audio community, and as much as I love the audio community, they also can be extremely opinionated and unforgiving because it didn't match what they prefer to do. Not that it's bad, it's just somebody's not doing what they want. It's like you're not rooting for my New Orleans Saints, all your other football teams suck. And I hate when that happens, because if I hear Omnisphere another time, for Christ's sake, you know, I mean, you don't have to have a phrase library to have something that is just being overused in the industry. And yet it's funny because there are some things like phrase libraries where I think people are resistant to try, yet have no problem comping and using the exact same presets that have existed from an Omnisphere library for the last 18 games, you know. And maybe part of that is because there are producers out there who said, oh my God, I loved this game, and then the composer says, well, I better give them that sound. That's certainly an option. But now, so as much as I sit here and complain about it, I am one who will never invest in Omnisphere because I just hear it everywhere. I don't have a copy. I don't want to have a copy. And there's so many things you can do. I mean, Omnisphere is, there was Absinthe before there was Omnisphere, I think. You know, just there are options out there. You don't have to go with Omnisphere. It's kind of a, well, that's not good for sponsorship, but let's move away from that. So, but hey, it's all about opinions. So we all have them, don't we, in some weird way. Well, I wanted to introduce this topic because I was blown away with the quality of Sonokinetic's DeSoto library. I don't know if anybody's used that, but the quality of the recording and the instruments that they used and the hall in which they used them really were impressive to me. And I was using some phrase libraries, like I was using Action Strings, my native instruments, and there's Spiritoso, which Mike and I have both looked into, and Animato, which is another one from 0G. And these are definitely phrase libraries. But Animato and Spiritoso, just like Action Strings, are these basic phrases like quarter note, you know, marcatos or something, or I don't know. You know, you get to choose. Now, when you get into the Sonokinetic stuff, and perhaps there's other people out there, because I haven't looked beyond Sonokinetic when it comes to phrase libraries, but I picked up Capriccio. And the whole reason we're late is because I was trying to get it set up so I could play something awesome for you. And my mic is coming through great, but my Ableton is not, so I'm not going to, you know, torture you guys with the beating of a cat. But with Capriccio, you can pick all these different phrases, and I'll do a screen share so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Let me do that, and this will lead to why I've become a fan of certainly what Sonokinetic is doing. Let me share. Let me figure out how to share. There's some place to share. There it is. Sharing is caring. Sharing is caring, people. Okay, here comes Ableton. Are you guys seeing Ableton?
Ooh. Yep.
And now you should see contact on top of it, right? All right, I'll lock in on me. So when I go away, though, it pops away. Because I hate that about Contact. When you give focus to another application, Contact decides, you don't want to see me anymore. It's so vain, Contact is. You're looking at somebody else. So here is Sonokinetic. Sorry, right here. I want to pop it down. This is their strings option from Capriccio.
I love that interface.
So, Alex, you went right to the first thing that impressed me with them. This is the way I visualize things that are going on musically. Like, I can picture right down here, this track here is going, and underneath it there's something going dun, 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 dun. And I bet you if I play it, that's exactly what it's doing. They've done some amazing artwork to really kind of visually represent what is happening. So just a quick run through. This is the high strings, mid strings, and low strings. You're not assigned to always have a high, mid, or low. You can change any of these to be high. You could have 3 highs, 2 mids, and a low. The low could be on top. It doesn't matter. These patches here, this A32, DO4, and F11, are related to the grouping of these together. So when I switch to F10, all three of them switch to the second grouping. And in this way, you can set up these presets that combine all of these different patterns together. And I'll go back to this one. When you click on the thing itself, here are all the different patterns you have. And you can choose from the highs, the mids, or the lows. And it's super simple. It makes sense. But what's great is you can hit that speaker right there and hear what it's going to do, which is definitely a benefit when you're trying to search for a sound, because it's a phrase, it's pre-recorded, they know what it sounds like. If you go into somebody else and you try to listen to it, you've got to put your hands on your keyboard, you might not be in the right place, you can't just hear what it could possibly do. So in some ways, the limitation of the phrase library gives it the opportunity to show you exactly what it's going to sound like. And there are a lot of phrases that you can choose from. And there are, I don't want to mislead, there are, in Capriccio, there are 16-bit and 24-bit. There are strings, woodwinds, brass, pitched percussion, and runs, multi-sampled percussion as well, and then a light version of all of those. So if you really have a slow machine, go 16-bit, which basically just limits you to one, or sorry, so go 16-bit, you know what that does, but then go light, and that limits you to one mic placement. That's one way to do it. So this is just the phrase options, and I can choose, oh, let me show you here, this is major and minor. So anything you see here that says MI/MA means that while it's running, you can change from a major triad to a minor triad, and it will follow along with you. If it doesn't have major minor, then if you switch from major to minor, it's not going to do a darn thing. So these things sound pretty cool. What's really impressive about the creativity, I think, that they put into this is that you hold a triad in this area here of blue keys, and you just have to hold it down. So, you know, D major, C, whatever. Just do the 1, 3, 5. And then you can, let me get over here so I can get to one that has key switching. They have this key switching option. Am I already there? Yeah, it's right here. This right here means that you can switch among the modes. So if you want to do our harmonic shifts, as they're calling it. So you can hold down your triad and then choose like the D on the key switch, and it'll go to the second of the triad or of that key that you're in. Does that make sense? And so in that way, you could just hold down a C major chord and just keep clicking on all of these harmonic shifts, and it'll take you through all of the different harmonic shifts that you want to go through. So you go to the second. So oftentimes in jazz, and I'm sure in other musics, but since I'm that's what it is for me, you know, we'll be sitting down playing and we'll say, okay, we're in F major and we're going to do a 12-bar blues and we're going to do 1, 5, 7, you know, and everybody knows what that means. And so this is the same thing. You hold out C major and you want this progression to go 1, 5, 2 or something crazy. And you can also customize it, which I don't want to adventure. Oh, here it is, harmonic shift customization. So I can customize if I want the flat 2 or the 2 or the flat 3 to be a major or a minor. So when I hit that key switch, even though I'm just holding down a triad with my left hand, my right hand is choosing all these key switches in time, and it'll go and flow through this pattern. Oh, is that somebody at Vince's door? So I thought that was pretty creative, right? Because now I've got this pattern that's going, and that takes forever to write that stuff down and to do the shifting and MIDI, and you know, you better know your keystrokes. Somebody just told me the other day that they had an instructor that said every time you don't use a shortcut key, a panda gets killed. So you better know your shortcut keys. That was what their instructor kept telling. So that is that's it in a nutshell. This gets to choose whether you want to control your volume swells through the modulation wheel or if it's going to be velocity sensitive. You can lock things in, like for instance here and here I've taken off the harmonic shift, but I left it on the high strings, and so the other ones will stay at the root while you move those high strings around in their thirds and fifths and wherever you want to go, which is super fun. And of course you can change all that up. This purges the samples so that you can kind of get back to work if things are going funky. But here's the one that I've been using a lot. Right up here is MIDI drag. So these are phrases that they have pre-recorded, but what they included is the MIDI, or sorry, the sheet music of what is actually being played. What I do with this, I drag that MIDI down here. Can you see me in Ableton and just drop it? And it'll go, okay, do you want to import the tempo? I'm just going to say no. And there's the MIDI now that I can use on something else. Well, that's not a good example because it was just one note going through there. But you get the point. And now what I do with this one is I assign this channel that just grabbed that MIDI to some other instrument. Maybe I'm using something out of Symphobia, or maybe I want to assign a solo violin from Friedlander to play in unison. Or, even better than that, let me get out of here so I can choose something actually really cool. And, whoops, let's go here. Let's just choose this. Maybe this is cool. That doesn't look cool. Pick one, guys. Tell me one. Pick any of those.
5.
Oh.
5.
Number
5.
2, 3, 4, 5. Right there?
That's number 5.
Yeah, what's a nice little vertical slash there?
Let's see what that looks like. All right, there we go. So I'm going to drag out MIDI.
Oh, okay.
Let's put this here. No, I don't want to do that.
I love the hieroglyphics in this interface. They're really suggestive of certain musical shapes, and I think it's very effective.
I think so too. And so, but here's what's cool about this is I can now take these notes and put them anywhere I want. I don't have to keep them the same, obviously. So if I want my cello to play, or my basses to play dom bom 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 bom, I've now changed it, and I didn't have to write any MIDI. And when there's legato phrases, they overlap automatically. So it's really, really cool that I can take this phrase that they've pre-recorded. It sounds good anyway. I can then take the MIDI out of that thing, go into my Ableton and edit it all up and assign it to somebody else. You can even do it with drums. Go drop that pattern into drums, and now your taikos are smacking at the same time that the bass goes off.
Now just to clarify for anyone out there who might be confused, if I understand correctly, what Kyle is doing is taking MIDI transcriptions of these patterns and he's throwing them into some other virtual instrument, but he is not able to magically extract the sounds that are in this plugin, the phrases themselves. It's just kind of taking the blueprint and then repurposing that for some other virtual instrument.
That's true. And if I wanted to get close to the sound, I can switch over to the Da Capo library, which, come on, Contact, quit making this expensive, man. Let people make these libraries over here at a regular price, because I hate going into here. But let me go down to Sonokinetic, and boy, I'll tell you what, this is a beautiful interface too. Let me bring up Da Capo all sections here. So I could load Da Capo as the virtual instrument that I have now assigned these MIDI notes to, and it's going to sound very similar because it was all recorded at the same time with the same orchestra, the same hall. Now they've got a new library out called iZotope, which is a much more filigree, a more gentle library. What they've done with their libraries, Capriccio, Grosso, Soto, and another one called Minimal, I think, is instead of giving you articulations or instrument expansions like other libraries are doing, they've actually subdivided theirs into, like, Grosso is these huge Flight of the Valkyrie kind of sounds. Capriccio is more Hans Zimmer, speed metal, going to get things done kind of library. Of course, there's a lot of crossover because, again, velocity sensitivity and things like that. You can really soften up these. But it's basically just it's a very feminine library. It's very beautiful and full. But Da Capo's taking a long time. But the point is still made that you could jump over to Da Capo and have a very similar sound and yet edit the notes.
At the cost of some of the realism of hearing the players naturally transition from one note to another.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Which is the whole point of a phrase library, is now instead of me writing something out, which I did just over this weekend, and it was just not coming together. I was talking to Mike, and Mike said, you know what it might be is that you're crossing from violins into violas, and that's why it doesn't sound real. Because my MIDI notes are all set where they're supposed to be. I've chosen the articulation I should have. I've stripped off any reverb, so I'm not hearing any kind of artifacts. And there's a certain point in this where it sounds weird for some reason, and no matter what I do to it, it's not sounding very good. So that's why a phrase library for me is something that I'll turn to. Now I want to say this as well, because like I said, I can get kind of long-winded about this because I've gotten very excited about Capriccio and DeSoto, is I write in a very specific way. I come up with a melody, and usually a harmony will come into that. There's usually some sort of drum pattern that starts to merge out of my head. But when those things come together, that's all I write. I write that one chord structure with the harmony and the melody and the drums, and I can't get out of it. I just will I'll keep lengthening my measures and keep duplicating and trying to do tricky things, and I forget all these rules about, you know, doing something with a middle eight or coming down off of you know, some sort of instrumental kind of run and changing the key right at the bottom, and little tricks, right? I don't think of that stuff when I'm in front of a DAW. I'm ham-fisting my way through it. So what I always do is I pull myself away, and I just go pie in the sky, and I make shit up, and I write it down on a piece of paper, and I go, okay, on the 12th bar, I'm going to introduce flutes that have similar to this main motif, but it's doing it half a beat off, so that we have this groove that is starting to build. I'll just write that down, and it doesn't make any sense necessarily, but and then in the middle, I want to break everything down to just the drums rumbling a little bit, and it also helps me when I'm writing to picture, because I'm kind of incorporating what I'm seeing with what I think would be cool musically, but I'm not writing a darn thing. I've got a pencil on a piece of paper. So when I do sit down and I start writing some more and I start fleshing out this melody that I have, I will say to myself, okay, and in this part, according to my notes here, I want to add this violin doing this kind of repetitive run for the next 4 bars. And with a phrase library, I can go in there. Now, I'll write the notes out, and I do often, of what I hear in my head, and I'm never fully satisfied. And so what I'll do is I'll go into this phrase library, and I'll just go, well, let me see what they've got there, and I'll just start rotating through their different phrases, because they're already in time. They're already for the length that I want, because I'm the one in charge of laying the MIDI notes down. And now I've got an orchestra at my disposal where I'm looking at the violins and I'm saying, no, I don't want that. Let's try this. Well, that's okay. I like that beginning part, but no, just do this whole other thing. And as I rotate through all these options, I get some cool stuff, and I go, oh, wait, that sounds cool, and I never would have thought of that. And so then I stuff that in there.
Are we able to hear any of these examples? Are we set up for it?
You know, that was what was plaguing me. I'm trying to get to it. By the way, here's Da Capo, which I think looks awesome. Got your different. You can zoom in on the instruments. So here's strings and brass and woodwinds and percussion, and you can zoom in on percussion and go, well, here are the cymbals. I'm going to pan them right and left and adjust their volume settings and stuff like that. And I can choose which. They have close mic, deca mic, wide mic, balcony. You know, I can choose all this stuff. I can turn on the IR, excuse me, and go to some sort of impulse that they're using, and they sound really good. But and all their tuning, you've got 442 if you're doing something against a live orchestra too, which is cool. So let me just hit play. Let's just hope it works. Now I don't know what I've run into, right? You guys watched me just randomly pull crap. If this sounds like crap, it's not my fault. Let me get rid of this so these MIDI notes don't accidentally go off. I've got my routing hooked up. Do you guys want me to give it a shot?
Yeah, give it a shot.
Alrighty. Wait a minute, which channel is it on? Oh, it's on this one right here. Okay, this contact 53. Uh-oh. Here's why I need an 88-key keyboard. This drives me nuts. Oh, come on. Really? I'm going to get defeated by the keyboard? I'm trying to find the triads. Where are you? Well, here's something that's kind of not great, right? Well, you're hearing Da Capo. Is that coming through?
It's not.
All right, hold on. Let me turn it off anyway, because I want a solo Capriccio. I need to find the keyboard. Oh, here we go. Now I'm finally getting there. Huh. I don't know why it's not responding. Hold on. Let me. Somebody fill the air while I figure this out. What do you guys think of what you've seen?
I love the the interface elements on these things, and I like that they put in some notation, so there's some sense of connection to the source material. And if nothing else, it'll encourage people to think of rhythm visually and in terms of notated phrases. So thumbs up on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being
I gotta
able to...
admit, I'm pretty impressed, Kyle. I am pretty impressed. I've never actually seen, because I don't have any phrase labs. I've never used them, so I've never actually seen the granularity that's available with them. That's pretty impressive. That you can really, the extent to which you can tweak what it's actually doing, sort of makes it more in the area of like a highly customizable orchestral instrument, you know, like kind of like a massively complicated arpeggiator.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, though, I have to admit.
Oh man, I'm glad you think it's cool. Here's my key studio, and for some reason it's just not letting it in. I'm not going to waste any time trying to figure that out, but I've got all ends, I've armed the track, and it's just not letting me have anything. This is, I know exactly what's going on. Ableton will freak its crap out if you change any kind of audio, and you never know when it's going to happen, and then you just have to restart Ableton. So I'm just going to end that screen share, and you know what? I'll put a demo up. How's that? There's also here. This is even better. Let me get to my web page here. Let me find. I'll stop my screen share, and I'll get back to the web here. I'm going to close down Ableton. Don't save, because if you go to their website, Sonokinetic.com, and you go to their library like Capriccio or whoever, they upload a lot of videos of how to do things. And that's a good place to go for a better example than me trying to fight with Ableton right now. I really wish Ableton would fix that, and I have no idea what it is. And when I get online, don't you hate those things? You get online and nobody else is having the problem, so nobody's talking about it?
I actually get that a lot. I think mostly because I know that I'm a glutton for punishment, and I try to do things rather differently than a lot of other people. So, like, not many people use this damn thing.
That's true, isn't it? That's true.
Oh, wait,
let me try this.
Audio.
I'm going to do one more screen share. Are you hearing audio?
I heard a little bit there.
Okay, well, I don't know if my routing's good, but I want to give you guys just a touch. So let me go back to screen sharing and bring this up. I don't think they're going to shut us down. If they send us a complaint, I'll say I'm sorry. Start screen share of the Capriccio tutorial. Let's see if you can hear this. Are you hearing that okay?
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Okay. Well, let me turn down the volume. All right, so here you can just see what he's doing. He's going to hold triads, and then these green keys over here, which you weren't seeing because Ableton freaked out on me. That's why they weren't coming in. These are the harmonic shift keys. These are mute keys. I think those are the mute keys. Might not be the mute keys. They got all kinds of different things. But it's pretty cool. Here's he dragged the video over like I was showing you. He's making changes to the velocity, and then he's dragging them down. All kinds of things you can do with that. Sorry I didn't have any audio examples, but hey, Vince, did you get Mike's files?
I did. I've got a couple of things here. What is this? Spiritoso excerpt 1 and Spiritoso excerpt 2.
Let me explain what these are. They require a little bit of narrational lead-up. I wanted to give an example of a very simple, very elemental phrase library and how I was able to use it in practice. And the library in question is Spiritoso by 0G. And what this library is a collection of solo cello rhythmic ostinati. So simple patterns like Alberti bass, you know, do, mi, sol, mi, do kind of stuff, or sometimes it's just a simple note being repeated. And what it lets you do in addition to controlling tempo is change the prevailing harmony. So there are buttons for major, minor, sus2, sus4, etc. And you know, you pick your preset, you pick your harmony, and you'll hear a solo cello doing some kind of rhythmic groove along those lines. And it does sound more real than if you just played those same patterns with a marcato patch or spiccato patch or something like that. And I was listening to them, and I was trying to think of a way. They're fun to play with, first of all. I mean, if you just sit down and jam, you know, they're very gratifying. But I was trying to think of a practical use for these things without it just being dropping in an artificial phrase and listening to it. And a project I was doing, it wasn't game audio, it was a film score. It was a documentary that had a big fencing scene. And I wanted kind of a rhythmically driven cue, but a very intimate sound, kind of a chamber orchestra sound, not a big ensemble, because it would have overwhelmed the scene. So I was able to take one of these patches, and let me ask Vince to play the first excerpt, which is just like 3 seconds of demonstrating what one of these phrases sounds like.
All right, here we go. Did you get that?
Not hearing it.
Oh, you didn't. Sorry. What happened there? Let me try this then. Sorry, I'll do this.
That sounds
pretty simple example. That's me holding down C or G or something like that, and you hear the rhythmic ostinato there. In that case, it is the simplest one. It's just a repeated note. But to my ears, that sounds a lot more realistic than if you were to slam the note over and over again, even with a good alternating round-robin sample library. There's something about it that sounds organic. So the second excerpt is about 30 seconds from the context of the score where I used it, and what I did is I whittled it down so it was a true solo sound. They let you kind of feign a larger ensemble, and I panned one cello left, one cello to the right, and added a little bit of noise, not literal noise, but rhythmic and precision to make it sound more like human beings. And I drew volume curves for both imaginary players, but the curves weren't exactly the same. So basically I pulled out every trick I could to make them sound not fake. And I think it's a very simple excerpt, just a simple rhythmic groove with a couple of instruments, but I think it sounds more real than you would get from individual notes. So I will ask Vince to play excerpt number 2, and you can be the judge.
All right, let's try this.
So to my ears, that sounds real-ish, and
yeah.
I found it was useful. So this is an example how very simple elemental phrase libraries, not entire passages, but little simple patterns can be useful building blocks.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, I'm going to. I have to say, I'm very impressed. It's actually. I'm really impressed with the Carl. That one year. What company was that before? The Capriccio strings. What was that?
Sonokinetic.
Yeah. Firstly, the interface is fantastic. How granular the control that they give you. I was under the impression that phrasal libraries are basically, kind of like orchestra loops, where you trigger one with one key and you go to the next key and it triggers another, and you just find the right ones that sound good together, and there you go. You got your orchestral music. I wasn't. I didn't know that you had that level of granular control over it to sort of shape it into something that, there's something unique and something specific for a purpose. Also, Mike's example, of course, as always, Mike's music is fantastic, but it's really interesting to hear. I can see what you mean, Mike, that, if you tried to do that phrase, something very simple like that, by doing it manually, you could probably do it, but it would just take a very, very long time. Whereas, of course, when it's a pre-recorded loop like that, but still having the granularity of control, I have to say I'm pretty impressed.
Well, what was nice about this case is that you could change the pitch center, so it wasn't obviously just the same pitch forever. I could hold down C, hold down G, and hold down E, or whatever progression I used, and essentially use it as almost like, you made an analogy to arpeggiators early, and in this case it is very similar to an arpeggiator, but it sounds organic and sort of real.
And you know what else is, you can add instruments. You can add a number of that same instrument to Spiritoso. You can say, I want 2 cellos, or I want 12 cellos. and it thickens up really nicely. Mike, you got to try action strings as well, because whereas Capriccio has these really fancy, well, that's not fair. They have not quite the simple quarter note back and forths that you're going to find in Spiritoso, and Spiritoso has some fancy stuff too. But they're mostly focused on some things that you wouldn't think to do or that are very difficult to write down in MIDI, and I appreciate that. But this is why I use action strings a lot too. And I was using Spiritoso, and I need to put it back into my template because it does sound good. That example you put up was just made me think, oh man, I got to get that back in my template. But I kind of replaced it with action strings, and the reason I did that is because with action strings, they have a number of different articulations on key switches, and they happen on the spot. Capriccio is not very good to jam with, because if you don't key switch right on the beat, it'll just mute. Or if you grab a triad that doesn't exist in their library, like a flat 5 or something, then it doesn't play anything because they didn't have anybody do that articulation when they were recording. They did a lot, but not always, and all the basics are there, majors and minors of everything, and some. But like maybe a flat 5's in there, but diminished is probably not there at all. But if you go to action strings, you can hold down any triad you want, and it plays that same articulation on all of those notes, on all of those intervals. And then you can key switch between different rhythm patterns. You might have dun 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 dun, and then the next one dun 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 dun, and it'll switch in time while you're playing. And you can really be fast with it. And in doing that, now you're starting to create patterns or phrases that you're writing yourself. Again, if you were sitting up with an orchestra and you could say, hey cellos. I know I wrote the part to just have quarter notes, but I'm starting to kind of dig this, like quarter notes for the first half of the bar and then like 16th notes for the second half, and see if you guys can do it, because I'm a torture artist. Well, I guess that's not too bad. 30 seconds. But, you can kind of make those calls by doing the key switching and action strings. So the combination of action strings and Capriccio has been working for me pretty well.
Man, that's
cool. So I think for most of the show, we've been speaking out in defense of phrase libraries because I think they have a bad rap, partly from the impression that I think Alex had, and the impression was probably valid 10 years ago or how long. But we've been speaking up, I think, intuitively out of defense of these libraries. Now, let me ask, how can phrase libraries be abused?
Oh, my God.
Well, that was the question that I had in the chat room just now. Like, where do you draw the line you mentioned in the chat room that it's a valid use of a phrase library to use it as a sketchpad to get ideas down quickly and then go and refine it later. But it sort of made me think, well, what then is an invalid use? And if you have phrase libraries with just phrases right up front, center stage, completely shameless, so to speak. Here it is. Here's my collection of phrase libraries. Is that, if it fits the music, and of course the end user, if they're getting into it and it complements the game, is that valid?
That's a great question, man. How can they be abused?
I guess it's kind of similar to using, like pre-made loops. Like if I think more in just something easier for me to relate to, something in my realm with synthesized music and electronic music. If you just slam together a song from your loop library, you've got a 136 BPM 4 on the floor dance floor beat, and then you've just got your 136 BPM mood bass, and then you've got 136 BPM fat super saw lead, and there you go. You've got your techno track.
Yeah, you're done.
Is that is that a valid way to approach producing this? And I guess it depends on the application. If you're going to go and sell that and have people play it in clubs, then probably no, it's not valid. But if you're going to put it in a game, and obviously in the sense of the game, the soundtrack is probably not the central focus of the experience. Of course, the focus is the actual gameplay itself. So maybe you could argue that, why not? I mean,
so if you do multiple projects and you keep using the same phrases, that's not going to be good for your career.
Right.
Also, if you don't, if all you use is phrase libraries, and maybe you're using some other library to do some sort of padding in the background, then you're not teaching yourself anything. You know, I guess you're not creatively going anywhere, because you're learning how to use the software, and as a byproduct, you may be using Capriccio and you're looking at the MIDI and you're learning how to write this kind of stuff if you were to write a score, these kind of phrases. And so in that way you're learning, but you're not learning, you know, you're not letting yourself be creative. And another thing is runs. You know, we need more runs libraries. The runs libraries I use, Capriccio's got some runs. I haven't heard them yet. I use OSR a lot, orchestral string runs, a lot. See, that defeats the purpose of what I'm saying. I don't use it a lot, but it's the one that I usually use when I need a run. And also, I just got Symphobia, and I've been listening to the runs there as well. But other than those three, I don't know who has. We need more run libraries with more creativity, because I listen to classical music all the time when I'm driving the car, and I'm always hearing some run that somebody just pulled that isn't in any of the libraries that I've heard, you know. And we have this really limited number of runs, and I can see where runs being phrases is where I'm going with this, where runs could be so easily abused because they're right at the front of the composition, because they stand out the minute they happen. And if you keep using from this, you know, pulling from this well that's only a couple of gallons of water deep, then it's just gonna be too much of the same thing. And we either need more runs or more creative runs. What I do like about OSR though is you can write your own runs. Has anybody used the run editor in OSR?
Nope.
I guess I should have brought that one up. Did you hear that? I said brought. I'm from Ohio. I guess I should have brought that one up as one of the phrase options too, because that's really, really super cool. Hey guys, we have to say thanks to our sponsor, and guess what else we have to do?
Oh, what
Does
else?
this have something to do with an exciting giveaway of some kind?
We are going to do another giveaway, fellas. So we have decided that, let me make sure I've spelled my hashtag right. So here's how it works. If you want to enter to win this product, which I'm about to expose, you need to go to, Twitter, and type something fancy that doesn't start with hashtag or @ right? Because that'll go right to us. It won't like spread its wings. I think you have to write a regular word, and then you can put an @ symbol. Isn't that how it works, Alex? Because you explained this to me, and I got lost.
Yeah, that's right. If you start a tweet with an @ at the beginning, then it's only visible to the person that the username is.
Gotcha. So don't do @. That's rule number 1. Say something like, "You guys is the bestest, and we loves us you very muchest." Don't do anything Jar Jar Binks like, or you will be disqualified upon entry. So what you need to type is whatever kind of love letter you want to send to us, and then put hashtag, phrase it up. You need to also include, please, after that, @Game Audio Hour and @iZotope Inc., and you will win. Well, whoever gets selected, we will pick iZotope 7 Advanced.
Ozone 7.
Wow.
Ozone 7 Advanced by iZotope. Sorry about that. Ozone 7 just did its dealio. It's an amazing piece of software, and this is the advanced version. This isn't their fantastically awesome, less than advanced version, which is still just unbelievable. But this is the advanced version. I just couldn't find the Ozone 7 Advanced words really quickly. So what you do, if you want to enter to win iZotope's Ozone 7 through our show, write some love letter, and I mean love letter. It better be juicy. Hashtag, phrase it up, then include @Game Audio Hour and @iZotope Inc., and you will be entered to win. And next week, we will do a drawing through our magical wizard, our Merlin math maker that Alex runs, and we'll figure out who is the winner.
Kyle, are any of
Yes.
us eligible? Because I've only got Ozone 7 Basic, which is amazingly awesome, he said, looking at our sponsor knowingly, yet I'm sure the advanced version is even better. So I bet you're going to say that only our listeners are eligible and that we're not eligible, huh?
We are not eligible.
Guys, it's been an honor working with you, but I quit the show. I need to get in on this. That's how good Ozone 7 is. It is more valuable than my friendship with any of you. So if that's not an incentive to all you listeners to go and get in on this and give us some promotional energy, I don't know what can be.
That's funny. So, Mike, if you quit the show, win the Ozone 7, are you going to send an email asking you if you can come back on the show?
Well, I assume, the week after you would let me back.
Totally legit.
And then I would do a review of Ozone 7 Advanced, of course. I mean, that's the least I can do in exchange for that generosity.
Oh man, well, it is an amazing piece of software, I'll tell you. And thank you to our sponsor iZotope for letting us grace you with these unbelievable pieces of technology. But we wanted to hit it big. It's right before Christmas. It's Black Friday's coming up, so we'll be doing a show right after Black Friday. Hey guys, you want to cover Black Friday MIDI next week?
Oh God, no!
Yeah, let's do that. Absolutely. Let's do it.
No, what?
Let's do it.
I think Vince just became eligible for Ozone 7 Advanced. You know what we should do is write a Black MIDI piece that is all about shopping and trampling people at big box stores.
I think
I am going to do a good job. I am not going to partake in, retail, physical Black Friday, whatever. I will say that there have been some fantastic Black Friday deals that have been going on online. iZotope actually has a couple of interesting deals on some of their bundles.
Absolutely.
They have their creative bundle with it has Iris and Brake Tweaker and Trash and Stutter. I just have Iris, but it's pretty cool, and you can get the bundle of that for $250 instead of $500. They have a lot of their other smaller instruments they've discounted down to $99, so that's pretty cool. And there's a bunch of other music companies that are doing Black Friday things. That's really cool. The whole trampling people to death at Walmart, not so cool.
All right, whatever. Spoil sport. It's a shopping sport. It's a full contact shopping weekend. The one thing I wanted to say about these sales, and I am such a nincompoop, is that I'll save up for GDC, I'll save up for some synth I want, and then I always spend the money right before Black Friday on something that I've been saving up for, and then I go, crap! It's the one time a year all these deals are going to happen. Wow. Unbelievable.
A little patience can go a long way around this time of year.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And another thing I started thinking we should probably mention really quickly just at the end of the show is that there are all kinds of, if you go to the manufacturer site, there's usually some sort of regular deal program that they've got going on, usually. Nomad Factory does that, and one show I want to talk about the Nomad Factory stuff. They've got some things that I just am in love with. I've been using them for a long time. I can talk deep on that. But like Waves, every weekend I get an email from Waves. I don't know if you've signed up for this, but you should sign up for it. Every weekend they do these deals. It doesn't matter if it's Black Friday or some July 4th giveaway, which is huge in Japan, July 4th. But basically, you hit this link on Saturday, and they'll present to you 3 or 4 plugins that they have deeply discounted. And then on Sunday, it's a different set. And you don't get to go backwards, and you don't know what's ahead of you. So it's kind of a trick, right? Because you might go, oh, I really want that, that IR4 reverb or something. I don't know, IR2, right? IR1. But then Sunday, you might find out that they put out an even better reverb, and you already spent your money on the first one. But that happens. But that's the game. But it's still cool that you get these options. So keep your eyes peeled, everybody, for the Black Friday shenanigans. We will spend our week trying to get Vince convinced Diamante to participate in the Black MIDI Friday.
Oh, God.
And we'll let you know how that turns out. In the meantime, thanks for watching the show. Let me pull this up so I can read it because I wrote down how many things people are supposed to tweet and twit and stuff. Thanks for watching the show. Special thank you to the live chat room. See, I wrote that in there just so I didn't forget about you because some shows I go away and I don't say thanks, chatties. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. Please follow us on Twitter. Please like us on Facebook. Alex, I got them all right.
That was beautiful. That was elegant. That was almost phrased, wasn't it? It was like the instant phrase. Press C3 and then you get that.
That would be a great phrase library, a Game Audio Hour Common Drops phrase library.
Yeah. Kyle's sickeningly bad segue phrase library sells to like 4 people. Of course, continue to send emails to info@gameaudiohour.com and join the chat room on our next show. I got to change that because it says join the forums on our site. But see how quickly I translated that in my head. We keep a close watch on these emails, which is very true, and we quickly respond to all of them through all of those mediums.
Which is not
How
true.
amazing is that write down that I just did? Didn't seem fake at all, did it?
Good job.
I'm buying. You guys buying?
Bye.
Buying.
Bye.